As we rush headlong into 2026, I thought it would be a wonderful time to spend a few minutes with your boy, Vladimir Putin, who, by many estimates, runs a great deal of the world's real estate, including a leading role in United States politics and governance. But I thought, in the wake of the Venezuelan operation, which Russia and Vladimir Putin have a hand in historically in Venezuela, I thought maybe we'd just take a little tour down memory lane with our boy Vladimir, because clearly we're going to be talking about him again. He is currently, uh, I would say, inarguably, the second most consequential leader in the universe right now after Xi Jinping. And the reason that I put people like Mr. Modi and DJT one step down the pecking order from Putin is that spheres of influence. It's something that's been a hot topic of podcasting jibber jabber and the legacy news, that is the world turning back into a three sphere proposition where China's big enough, but they're the Eastern sphere and part of the Pacific, and the European sphere under the control of Vladimir Putin, and the Americas, and presumably Canada for those that are playing this game with DJT. But of course, what portion of DJT's influence is actually controlled by Vladimir Putin? We'll discuss. Um, Putin, as you may or may not know, is born in Leningrad in 1952. And Leningrad, which is now called St. Petersburg, and in fact was called St. Petersburg at its founding, which was, I think, in the first few years of the 1700s. So the 18th century is when it was initially called St. Petersburg, Peter the Great. And then it evolved during the Soviet Union times. Leningrad, which was kind of always the second city to Moscow, and some will quibble with that, and some with greater Russian history credentials are entitled to. But until they speak up, then they can remain seated. So yeah, it was St. Petersburg, and then Petrograd, and then Leningrad, and then once again St. Petersburg. And he came out of that, in a traditional sort of Russian working class, lower middle class family, where his dad was a Navy officer, and his mom was, I believe, a factory worker. And Putin was one of three kids, and he studied law at university. And then his first meaningful job was the KGB, and so important for everything that we've come to know about the modern Putin. That foundation, the infrastructure of his dastardly deeds, was formed by the one of the three most important security services in the world at that time. It was the U.S., Um, you know, the OSS that transitioned into CIA in Great Britain, the MI6, MI5 being domestic and MI6 being foreign, and the KGB, and that they dedicated substantial resources to that endeavor because they were paranoid, with good reason, that America, the influence of the decadent West, was going to continue to try to meddle in the Soviet affairs, and they were right. And we meddled in theirs, and they meddled in ours, and it was a delightful time to be alive because it made for great stories. Without the KGB running up against CIA and MI6, then we would have missed out on some great stories and movies and literature. John le Carre, right? Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy, and Smiley's People, which are the bookends of a trilogy, the Carla trilogy, um, is, I would argue with you, and we can fight later. We can set a time and a location and put on our battle gear. But I will argue with anybody that'll listen that regardless of genre, that Tinker Tailor is one of the 10 greatest works of English language fiction in the last 100 years. I'll fight anybody for the technical, the expertise, the language. John le Carre, former. That was his pen name. It was David Cornwall was his name at birth to his friends, and that he was such a magnificent technician of the English language. If you read it today, I reread that book. I would bet that I've reread it once every second year for 20 years. About, right? So I bet I've read the book. I don't read anything anymore because of old age and bad eyes, but audiobooks, right? I consume that magnificent story uh, again and again. So I would that is a recommendation, the kids call it. So if you're looking for something that is a delightful read and has an air of Soviet influence, which we got plenty of that in our world, as we will see as we continue down the road. I just took a tangent, but it's a magnificent book. And if you've not read it, I would get a copy, listen to it on audiobook. And there are a lot of different. It was written more than 40 years ago, I would guess. There are a number of different audiobook editions. There are also editions that are sort of like a performance version where they have characters speaking the parts like you're watching it on stage, and that's fun too. But it's distracting to people people that have read the story before. But in any case, so that is Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy, the third book in the Carla trilogy of John le Carre, whose real name is David Cornwall, who worked for British Secret Service legitimately, not like a lot of people that write books and say because they swab the decks on a boat that they're the ship's captain. Yeah, generally not. Uh, like J.D. Vance, a war hero. Yeah, no, J.D. Vance was a Marine, but he was a reporter in the Marines. You know, he served in the Marines. I did not serve in the Marines. So tribute for that, but, you know, not a decorated war veteran, nor has he professed to be, but he'd rather leave it unspoken, take the credit as a veteran and move on. Because if you look any deeper, I mean, not people that serve don't serve with distinction and they don't behave with distinction after the fact. I give you one, Pistol Pete Hegseth. So, but our dear friend Vladimir Putin did, in fact, serve with distinction for 16 years in the KGB. And importantly, a stint of about 5 or 6 years of that was in Germany, specifically in East Germany before the wall came down. And he may have been there at the time the wall came. No, I I will not stand on that because I don't have the timeline in front of me. Uh, but the important part of that is that he was a KGB, uh, uh, a, a KGB officer serving alongside the Stasi, which was the second most important spy agency in the Cold War after the KGB. So it was, KGB was the big dog, but the Stasi were notoriously efficient and brutal. Brutal. There was their headquarters, Norman and Strauss, were notorious for some, we'll call them colloquially, we'll call them torture chambers. There were some bad people that did some bad things at the old Normanstrasse, the headquarters of the of that organization. And so, at that time, he was living in Dresden, in East Germany. Now, Germany, of course, is reunified, but it'll come back because the most important kind of legacy of that on his side is he is intimately familiar with Germany. He's a fluent German speaker, but he also served with the intelligence services and continued the connection with those services after the fall of the Berlin Wall. That matters a lot now. Might as well go there. That in current days, this is something that's going to be a big part of our lives. The AFD, the I won't call them Nazis because they don't call themselves Nazis. We'll just say the ones that behave like Nazis um, in Germany that are about to win some very important elections in the very near future. And one of them I mentioned in the last few days that two of the most, excuse me, two states in the former East Germany will go the way of the AFD from a plurality perspective or a majority perspective, yet to be determined because the election hasn't happened yet. And I can tell a lot of stories, but I'm not going to guess at the way that the German electorate is going to go. Excuse me. But it is likely that they will hold two. Those are the state elections that after the next round, and they don't run on the same schedule necessarily, but that the AFD will come out with control into more rural states. The populations are smaller, but small populations when you're trying to grow a political movement are not always a bad thing because you're able to influence them, just like uh, gaining votes and momentum in Iowa is a lot less expensive than doing it in Texas or in New York, California. So they can create a sense of momentum in with less money and get some positive press out of it, and perhaps increase their margin nationally in the further down the line. Money is important because guess who your boy Vladimir Putin has influenced elections in Germany before, and that will only expand, right? So that is the legacy of his time in Dresden with the KGB before the fall of the Berlin Wall that continues on today. And that, as we're making a turn around the world, will end in the United States. But I'll just continue east. I passed over the UK. Nigel Farage, right, is the Reform Party candidate who is going to do a lot better in the next when they call in new elections. That Keir Starmer is going to be in some trouble. The the Tories are really underwater and screwed. But in Labour, where Keir Starmer is, it's going to be a problem because it's all based on sort of a mega overflow of racism and anti-immigration sentiment, which Nigel Farage is exploding. And he has received funding from, if not Vladimir Putin, from oligarchs that are wholly, entirely beholden to Vladimir Putin, right? And even Tommy Robinson, who, if you haven't learned about Tommy Robinson, you can do a little sidebar on that crazy MF. He, in fact, was in Russia and did some funny things with money over there. And he's not he is so repulsive that he's unlikely to gain much traction if he should run for anything in the UK. But he's a cautionary tale that even somebody as repugnant as Tommy Robinson can get a little bit of purchase, and he makes Nigel Farage look good by comparison. So we bounce back to the UK. We talked about Germany and the AfD a little bit. The next most important country, Germany is the strongest, richest country in Europe. And then you go to France, and all of the in the background, what the Russians have been doing through Vladimir Putin is trying to chip away. There's the Brexit movement. There are forces within the UK that want like a soft reunification because they see the benefits financially for the UK getting closer again to the EU. But at the same time, Putin doesn't want that because he wants to fracture the EU. He would Putin would rather, like NATO is 30 countries, right? EU, economic power stronger together. And what Putin wants to do is he wants to destroy that strength that EU has together, that NATO has together. That's why he was always talking about, Ukraine, whatever happens, they can never be a member of NATO. They can maybe a member of EU, but maybe much later he wants that to go in the other direction. In France, um, Marine Le Pen, right? She is the candidate who was barred from running in the most recent election, and she's going to have some trouble in the next round too because of the extremists involved in her campaign, and also in campaign finance irregularities related to one guess only, 3-2-1, Vladimir Putin. Russia made a loan back before DJT 1.0, made about, I think it was, we'll call it a $10 million loan to Marine Le Pen and her party, which has been paid back allegedly, but the details of that are a little bit sketchy. Marine Le Pen, her father was extraordinarily influential and that party's leader until his passing a couple years ago. And Marine Le Pen is kind of the heir apparent of the Russia-aligned conservative far right, little Nazi-ish party in France. But she'll have some support, and like J.D. Vance traveling as he did in February to the Munich conference. He also, shares his beliefs with people in France, trying to mega up the base there so they get a more conservative breed of leader in France. Because, as everybody knows, if you got Germany and France and the UK, you basically have control of the whole shooting match. What are the Greeks going to come and get you? Unlikely. Nice people. But they don't have the economic power. They've got the islands. They've got great food, but they don't have the economic might. And Ms. Merloni just yesterday, just making a quick trip down to Italy. She's to the right of the current governments in Germany, France, and the UK, but anybody would be. And she just made a suggestion of closer alignment with, I'll have to catch up on that. She made a statement either against the interest of Ukraine or a positive statement towards Russia. Not a full-throated endorsement of Putin, but she's not antagonistic towards Putin, and he values her because that's a foothold into a country that has a fascist past. So he would think correctly that there would be a chance to get a foothold in Italy more easily than in other parts of Europe. So Europe as a whole, Putin wants to chip away at EU and NATO. He's been doing it his entire life. Think about it. He looks at the original framework of the Soviet Union as this mythical ruler. He thinks like a czarist. He thinks of himself as like a Peter the Great acolyte and somebody of that stature. So he thinks of himself as a czar, so to speak, as a supreme leader. Not surprising, the connection with his asset DJT. But and then I can't go through every country because I will bore you to tears. But if you think about the countries that were part of the Soviet Union originally, and a lot of them have Stan on the end of them, right? Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, right? That these kind of, not Pakistan, these countries are still aligned because they have interests in energy and drilling of oil, aligned with Russia, and enjoy the strength of associating with a strong man like Vladimir Putin. Yeah, the larger and more consequential countries in the region that align with him are your boy Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Turkey, Iran, right? Another somewhat fractured oil producing nation with some pretty bizarre political ideas. So they're on team. He's been when you look at the travel itinerary of this great gentleman, Vladimir. He helping to keep the Assad regime together in Syria until it fell, and now Assad is living in Moscow. Been to Tehran because they want to fight against the American, the imperial West. Erdogan, oh, we'll call him kindly. We'll call him an Israel skeptic, if not entirely antagonistic to. He is a Muslim population, but he's been Erdogan's been very successful at walking that kind of tightrope, right, of being a there he doesn't tolerate the Islamic extremism in his country because that would put his power in jeopardy. So he's very careful, excuse me. But he's not distancing himself from that important part of his of his constituency. And and Vladimir Putin sells a lot of weapons to him, has over the years. They're actually manufacturing more of their own these days. And and Putin still he casts a weary eye towards Israel too, because another legitimate power that doesn't fall directly under his influence, although his relationship with Bibi behind the scenes is something worth further discussion at some other time. So yeah, I'll pick up the pace a little bit because it's a big world. As It's still round. If you're not living in south of the Mason-Dixon line, it is still a round world, and its travel takes time. So we'll just say that through Europe, west and east, Putin has a tremendous amount of influence, and that's kind of his sphere. Now, his big homeboy, of course, as we go way, we travel all the way across Russia to Vladivostok. We're on the Pacific up towards the Bering Straits, but China is right there on his front door, on that end of his influence, on the eastern end of his country, and that is Xi Jinping is the one man in the universe that he is legitimately frightened of, I would argue, because Xi Jinping is tremendously powerful with a much larger military, with much more sophisticated weaponry, and the will to use it. Endless resources otherwise, they need oil, like so many other places, but they have plenty of sources, even though DJT might be messing that up a little bit from Venezuela. That'll get ironed out because the money will be passed back and forth to DJT's children and son-in-law and all that, and that'll get ironed out because the only people that will ultimately pay in that relationship is the Venezuelan people, who will be left on the short end of the stick. Speaking of short sticks, we'll get back to Marco Rubio shortly. So Putin continues around his world and leaves his zone of influence, and has good relationships with India, the only other country in the universe with over 1 billion people. Right? He has energy deals with them. He has weapons deals with them. But he has to be very careful because it's sort of it's more of Xi Jinping's area of influence to not overstep. So, you saw them all meet together, and that he's probably in very close consultation with Xi. Just water, nothing more exciting than that. So he has to be very careful about the deals with India because he doesn't want to upset the power balance between India and um, and China. Nestled in between those two zones, of course, is the Middle East. There's, as I talked about yesterday, was the two supreme leaders in the Middle East are MBS, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, or KSA, and MBZ or MBZ, who is the supreme leader of UAE, Dubai, United Arab Emirates. Right? And those two, MBS and MBZ, are two of the richest men in the world. They have personal wealth. Their personal wealth is not approaching your boy Elon, but nobody else's is. It is. I would guess that they're both right around $70 billion personally. Say 50 to 70 personally, but they also control their own country's sovereign wealth fund, which is the people's money, but they control it. So they have, let's say that they have access to whatever they need. They have relationships with Putin. He's wary of them because they're they're wild cards. They don't fear Putin as much as need him. The relationship with the piece I did yesterday on the conflict gold is important because Putin is just a zip down through Africa. Putin, through the Wagner Group, is is extraordinarily influential in Africa, as China is. But the Wagner Group, with malign intent, fomenting rebellion and insurrection at about every turn of a very big continent. And they have their hands in the conflict gold and diamonds and other things, just as the two leaders from the Emirates are imminently involved in the conflict gold. So that's another source of income, another way to move funds around other than crypto. Gold is a easily transferred asset. I mean, the bars are heavy, but it's relative to other traditional forms of currency. Of course, everything trends towards your boy CZ, Binance, and crypto as the easiest way. But what folks are finding out is that on the blockchain, that promised ultimate anonymity that goes along with Bitcoin and the blockchain is not that, because the technology of you've heard of that AI fake news thing. The technology involved in AI is outpacing the encryption possibilities, right? So yeah. So we span that part of the globe. We'll just that's Xi. That's his zone. They'll continue to work together. He'll buy and sell weapons, sell Xi all the oil that he possibly can, work out a natural gas pipeline that services China as needed. Do whatever Xi tells him to do because he wants to keep him sweet. Xi's a little bit younger than Voda, our boy. But and then he has various deals in Malaysia and other places. Australia, they don't want too much to do with him, and we're back to the U.S. Canada, I'll leave alone because he has trade deals where convenient. Well, we're back to the U.S. Um, or South America. I'll do Venezuela plus other stuff. Putin has been to South America a dozen plus times since he's led Russia. Right? He has been to Cuba a couple times, Venezuela a couple times. He's been to Brazil. He's been in a few other places. Um, he Putin has always been more of a you come to me kind of guy because it's a power play. Like, I'm busy. So if you want an audience with Voda, you got to come to Voda. Right? So that, he has certainly, there's the historical Cuban relationship with Russia going back to Nikita Khrushchev. And the appropriately named Cuban Missile Crisis because hashtag missiles were in Cuba. But that was a time when, Castro was in Russia for 6 months following the Cuban Missile Crisis, kind of a re education program, binding the countries closer together. So there's a legacy of that Cuban military connection to Russia going back to the Cuban Missile Crisis and continuing all the way through. Cuba provided military and military intelligence support for Hugo Chavez and Maduro over the years. So you look at the tentacles or the bloodlines, the DNA of that. It goes back to Russia, right? So Russia, KGB, Cuban intelligence services, DSG, connect through to Venezuela for decades, right? So much because the Chavez seemed to think that if he outsourced some of that function, then he could keep some separation and keep the generals in his own country from getting too strong, and thereby uh, uh, doing having a coup and tossing his ass to the side of the road. And it worked. It worked great for Chavez, and he was a charismatic leader. Getting off of Putin for a minute, but Hugo Chavez, not a great guy, not great to his people, but a charismatic leader. He had the charisma that Maduro never had. Maduro was a drip that became a tyrant because he needed more juice, and that was all he had. He couldn't turn on the charisma switch like Hugo Chavez. I remember living there in Venezuela and turning on the radio on Sunday, and Chavez's program "A lo Presidente" would just go on for hours, not an hour. If I could be just you know uh, old man brain cramping this, but I used to listen to it because it would help improve my Spanish as I was living in a Spanish speaking country. Um, so I would listen to, I mean, obviously, political, dweeb, nut, um, into that my every day of my life. A student of politics since I could study anything. You know, that was my my life's study, if not my life's work. So listening to Allo Presidente, I could hear the rhetoric of the Chavismo, the the socialism that was very specific to Venezuela and personalized to Hugo Chavez, but certainly influenced heavily by Fidel Castro because they were interconnected in so many ways. They were dependent on each other. Cuba was dependent on what was essentially free Venezuelan oil that kept the Cuban economy afloat because they didn't have tremendous amounts of agriculture. They had cigars, exploding or otherwise. I mean, I remember buying not counterfeit, getting smuggled cigars in Miami in the old days because you couldn't legally buy Monte Cristos, right? You couldn't buy the good stuff in the U.S. because it was on a banned products list. But yeah, well, Miami, you can get anything you need. This before Uber, you could get everything you need. Uh, uh, yeah, I mean, no, don't want to go there. You get anything you needed as quickly as you wanted to pay for it at any time, right? Cohiba, right? Cigars just being the easiest example of that non-human part. So, but that's he had Putin had and has his fingerprints all over that. As the German example is going to be very meaningful in the next few years because it's his. He wants to bring out the Nazi in Germany that will help him. He screams and calls Ukrainians Nazis, including the dear president, which is just, it's like Trump screaming things like the bullshit, the woke, the socialist, social now laugh, communists calling Democrats words like that. That will be like the mildest insult ever because Trump has nationalized so many parts of the American economy already. So he's bleeding red like his ugly polyester hats. But so Putin is intimately connected into the seat of American government. His just a quick rewind through the Trump 1.0. So Russian operatives were were living in Trump Tower beginning in at least in 2014, and other Russian operatives were living in Trump licensed, partially owned, but licensed buildings in Miami Beach, in what I would affectionately refer to as the Russian Riviera, which is Sunny Isles Beach, north of the north part of Miami Beach. But consequentially, in New York, close to Trump, there were many Russians, some with connections to Russian state security, on hand, beginning to work Trump 2 years before he won his election. Not in dispute. You can dispute the degree to which it happened, till before Roger Stone got involved, but it happened repeatedly. And so it was a sustained program. It had a name. It was an operation. It was the name that I can't pronounce, but it's in the title of this video essay, right? That's that Laka, the name of the city, which is, as I understand, that particular word doesn't have a meaning in Russian other than it is the name of a city close to St. Petersburg, right? So this operation, which began in 2014 and was on full blast by the time the election came, was engineered to take down Hillary and elevate Trump. That is beyond dispute. That happened. The uh, Trump has spent years trying to poo-poo fake news but that doesn't mean it wasn't true. It means it's inconvenient for him to admit that he didn't win the election on his own merits. He had plenty of money, but he had juice, Russian state security juice. Vladimir Putin wanted somebody in place that he could control more easily than Hillary Rodham Clinton certainly than the predecessor, dear Barack Hussein Obama. I need to be able to say Hussein in a way that MAGA does, but I don't. I can't do that. I'll work on. I'm going to workshop that too. But dear President Barack Obama would not be under the influence of the Russians. He would be have a contrary position to that. Trump was, Trump is, Trump remains under the influence of Vladimir Putin. Right? It started in 14. It ramped up to Trump 1.0 victory, and then they missed by a little bit, but not by much. And then they had what they said was the landslide last year, which was that's absolute bullshit. It was a a victory. They they rallied and did better in the popular vote than he did against Hillary when he lost the popular vote in 16. But it's still there. He still has a hand in it, and and he's using it. He has power. Of course, he has power. He'll use it. And as I was joking in a little IG post this morning about that he bought a little island, you know, called Aruba, because he wanted a warm place to sit and watch his assets in Venezuela as the to and fro, and that he made a mistake, and he told his asset, Donald J. Trump, to do the invasion, but only in a month that didn't end in Y, and that was his only direction, right? So Trump has had been president for what was it? He was sworn in on the 21st of January, right? And yeah, so he waited and he waited and he waited and waited for the. It's hard to believe that it's been a year already, but he had to wait again for to because he couldn't spell. He did his invasion in January when Putin was shooting for March or April, but that's fine. It happened uh, today. Nicolas Maduro was supposed to be indicted with alongside his wife in Manhattan District Court or the court, Southern District of New York, and will be charged presumably. What the workout will be, what the terms of all of that will be, it'll be delightful and entertaining because he is charged. It was almost poetic that they included a charge in the. He had previously been indicted, Maduro, and his wife and other people that are now not indicted again. The former security minister in Venezuela and others, that they included the machine gun charge in the charging document, which is fun because everybody loves a machine gun. Friends of yours and mine that, in or out of the Sinaloa cartel and in other parts of pharmaceutical governance in Mexico and other places. Everybody loves a Tommy gun. Right? The charging documents in the that led to the conviction, the unambiguous conviction of Juan Orlando Hernandez, the former president of Honduras. The sentence that your boy Donald J. Trump, the man that he pardoned, an unconditional pardon last month, essentially Maduro was being charged with the exact same crimes that Juan Orlando was charged with going back to the Biden administration. Biden did not pardon him. That was Donald J. Trump. Biden was the one that convicted him, as he did CZ, the gentleman that financed Hamas in the days leading up to the October 2023 attack on the kibbutz. So those are the people that DJT is pardoning. Is he doing it himself? Is he doing it at the direction of anyone else? Is he doing it in cooperation with anyone else? It'll, uh, fewer and fewer secrets in our world because of AI, because of other things, because encryption is not what it used to be. The blockchain technology, as I mentioned, is not as bulletproof. Now they'll come up with, there will be a new, better mousetrap, and then AI will get smarter and figure it out. And then, it'll be a seesaw back and forth. I have certainly monopolized your attention for long enough, but I love talking about, reading about, studying about, thinking about Vladimir Putin because of his very important position in his relationship with Donald J. Trump, the war with Ukraine, the ways in which Putin has influenced Trump before and after that Alaskan adventure. You're going to be telling your grandkids about that, right? The American president rolled out the red carpet and essentially kissed ass of a Russian dictator on American soil. The first time, check my notes, my mental notes, the first time that Vladimir Putin has been on American soil for a decade, anywhere. And they did, Alaska, a former Russian territory. They did it there. Maybe he thought that the escape rooms were a better fit or something like that. But it was interesting that he visited Trump on a former Russian territory, and I'm assuming that if Trump goes for Greenland, that Putin will want Alaska back. So we'll watch that and let it cook. But Putin is a man for all seasons, right? A polymath. He's a judo expert, black belt in that and one other Asian hand fighting discipline, either karate or something that has a cooler name than that. But he was a black belt as a boy. He was he's a badass. He's about the size of your boy Marco Rubio, so he's not an imposing size, but there are a lot of Michael Carbajal, the boxer, who I think weighed in at 115, could kick my 210 down the street anytime they want, because you know what? Knowing how means a lot. I meant that figuratively, because knowing other things helps too. But yeah, so Vladimir is a verifiable badass who is afraid only of Xi, not afraid of DJT because he controls DJT. And that's where he is. And that's where he'll remain until the time that he is in the ground, because he's not going anywhere. No emergency, no snap elections in Moscow coming up this week. News at 11 ain't going to happen. Sorry to disappoint those that are we're hoping for something different. No snap elections coming in China either. Our elections, our midterms are going to be very interesting because of all of the shenanigans that are going to go on. Putting in the armed, masked. I joke on my various feeds about the voter booth concierges that Trump is going to try to install to interrupt the elections, to scare anybody away from voting. So we need to really focus on mail-in balloting, which we got some work to do and not that much time. I mean, this year is going to go by. I mean, the World Cup, whatever's going to happen with that, with masked ICE officers running around. And one of the teams that's playing in my home city in Boston is Ghana. And will they, they've been brutal and racist in the way that they've treated people all over the country. How about people that don't speak English? Of course, they'll be protected by security details and on buses and group transport and not wandering around. But how miserable that you miss out. World Cup is one of the great DEI adventures in the world, right? That diversity, equity, and inclusion is what World Cup is all about. Like the Olympics, is you go, you compete in the event, you love your team, but then you meet your opponent and you learn about the city and the country you're visiting, because it may be that it's the only time that you're going to visit the country. You're uh, you're a gymnast from Azerbaijan visiting the LA Olympics in 28. You're in the United States. You may not have the financial wherewithal to kick it in Hollywood, you know, at some point in the future. You're there with your team. And what do you got masked ice people, ice holes screwing up your adventure, right? So enough of the preach. This was about our boy Vladimir, and we will leave him in peace for today. We will wish you all a most blessed day, and thank you very much for your attention. Please restack and do all of those social media tricks that allows this to get to other people. You will see that I've been trying to do mentions on TikTok and other platforms, and anything you can do to help to that end would be appreciated. And I appreciate everything you do and your attention, and we will talk to you sometime tomorrow. Thank you so much.